So there's 4 parts to what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the design process and commissioning and how that interacts with the design process. And I'm going to cover it in 4 parts. First, I'm going to talk about some of the macro issues with design. Then I'm going to talk about what commissioning actually is. Then I'm going to talk quickly about some real evidence out there that commissioning actually does start in design. Now I'm going to talk about 7 design tasks that should be done. So just quickly, these are my coordinates, my social media coordinates. I have a podcast and a blog. Quickly about AESG, I work for AESG, I'm a global director of AESG. We do commissioning, but we also have design services, so the connection of design to commissioning is a real issue for us. So let's talk about what owners want. Unicorns and rainbows, right? So every owner, no owner or developer ever says, I want to design a building, I'm okay with 2,000 defects. Said no owner ever, right? So why do they get that? So I think if you're a developer, you've got to get lucky 4 times to get a great building, right? So first bit of luck you've got to do, you've got to ask for it properly. So just saying, I want a LEED Gold building, I want a BREEAM Excellent building doesn't actually mean anything. You've really got to ask for it correctly. So shout out to British Land and M3 Consulting, they're pretty good at that. But let's say you did that properly, right? Then you've got to find someone who can design to BREEAM Excellent, LEED Gold, LEED Platinum. There's less of them around than you think. For every 10 firms that tell you they can do that well, I would say maybe 5 or 6 can actually do it. But every problem, I believe, every problem you're going to have on a project is baked into the design. 50% to 80% of every problem you're going to experience is in them design documents. So if you can intervene during design, or even ask for it properly. If you don't specify what you want to the design team and give them a good design brief, the design team is going to give you what they think you want, right? So you've got to really lay it out. But let's say you've done that well twice. You've then got to go out to tender and find a construction firm that can deliver at a high level. Now, what you've got to remember is the best possible outcome in a construction process is minimum compliance with the spec. That's it. In your wildest dreams, if everything happens well and 24 doves fly over your project in the sign of a cross, that's the best thing that can happen to you, right? I personally have not seen that happen very often at all in 40 years now. Let's say you've got lucky 3 times. Then you've got to commission it. So why do we have commissioning, building commissioning? There's no building commissioning for cars, there's no building commissioning for laptops, and there's a reason for that. They work out of the box. Buildings are complex, they're not plug and play. So you've got to do all them 3 things, and then you've got to commission it. And then, if you're lucky, you get a building with minimal defects that performs well, right? This is a research project by BRE. So they found, canvassing projects all across the UK, that 50% of every problem is a design problem. I would argue it's more than that. That's where my 80% comes from. But let's pretend I'm not making it up. So BRE, no less, declare 50% of all problems you face are design-based problems. That means any intervention you can make in the design process and add a layer of quality to that, or remove a problem, you can do for really low cost. So if there's any designers here, 50% of every problems in the jobs are on you. KPIs. So project managers, right? Time, cost, quality, the old triangle. I would argue RFIs are one of the best KPIs to monitor. Look at you, Rob. So why is that? In my opinion, RFIs are a referendum on the design product. There are 2 types of RFI. There's the one where the contractor can't be bothered to read the spec and they should be given short shrift, right? Read the spec. But there's genuine RFIs where there's design problems, coordination problems, missing information, and they always lead to change orders. Contractually, an RFI is a change order in disguise, right? So, KPIs, just if you want to take one thing away, and you're a commissioning management firm, monitor the RFIs on every job and report that publicly. That is my wish. But keeping it macro, right? What is a design team's job? So if you speak with an architect, they'll say, well, this building's having a conversation with this building and the public realm this and the LEED Platinum that. But really, the design team's job is one thing, produce a set of spec and drawings that tell the construction team what to do, right? But let's talk about what is commissioning. So in my opinion, commissioning is not testing and balancing. Right? So ASHRAE, outside of the UK, ASHRAE is really the considered definition of commissioning, which is it's a quality-focused process. I hate this definition. It's too long, it's too wordy. And when you define something as a quality process, it implies if you check all the text sheets and give loads of binders over, the job is done. And that's not. Paperwork is evidence. It's the work and the testing that matters. I like the CSA definition, which is about taking the system from static completion to operation. I think that is the really good definition, and that's the one I try and push when I'm overseas. But the best definition ever is 3 words: trust but verify. Just doesn't happen. So I would argue that commissioning, like building services in general, is an essential invisible service, right? We only notice them when we need them. So let's talk about evidence. There is actually several areas where there is hard evidence that commissioning begins during design. Just by a show of hands, put your hand up if you are frequently involved in design phase commissioning services. Anyone? It's about 40% of the room. Okay, that's good. That's more than I thought it would be, actually. When I ask that question in other countries, it's no hands up. So following Grenfell, everyone knows the building regulations are being updated. It's going to be a lot more evidence-based. The golden thread is coming through, so the ability to not be accountable is going to slowly go away. Now, the new revisions of Code L and F, they refer to CSA Code M. So there is a hard link between building regulations and CSA Commissioning Code M, commissioning management. Commissioning Code M has just been updated, and it's out for public review and is going to be published this summer. Commissioning Code M in its new form is a very good document. The old form was not very good, but the new form is great. And we're going to cover that. So just what I like about the new Code M and the new regs is there is a hard link now. So let's talk about other evidence. Who's done a BREEAM job? Stick your hand up. Was you involved in commissioning in design phase in BREEAM? Anyone? Stick your hand up. Okay, not bad. So that was about 25% versus 10% in action, okay? So BREEAM are very clear. This begins in design. I personally, in the few BREEAM jobs I've done in this country, it makes me angry that it's just a tick box exercise. They don't get you involved early. Lead, very clear. If you are doing a lead job, there is a presupposition. A lead assumes that the commissioning authority has been hired early by the owner to advise them on the design brief and be there all the way through. I'd say 8 out of 10 lead jobs I do, I get hired late in construction. The new Code M. So, Ted's laughing. Just caveat this right now. Code M is out for review. I don't know what its final format is going to be. But what I do know is, and we've worked hard on, is mapping commissioning tasks to the REBA stages. So if it gets published how I think it's going to be published, there will be deliverables in several stages from REBA 0 to end, right? So we're going to talk about REBA stages 1, 2, 3, and 4 today, and the tasks that I believe you should do, and hopefully CSA will as well. Right? So there are 25 commissioning management tasks mapped to the REBA stages of work, and 11 are design phase. I'm going to talk about 7 design tasks here, right? So the first one is what LEED call the owner's project requirements, and what we in the UK call the design brief. So this is about asking for it properly, right? If you just say, give me a LEED gold building, you're going to get whatever the design team want. LEED assume that you've been involved early and helped write this and structure this design brief, right? I was lucky. I had 7 years as a development project manager, and I saw what was really pretty much leading edge development management work. And the high-end developers are quite good at asking for what they want, but the mid-levels and below are not good at it. So, you've got to lay this out. If you can get involved early, and you should be involved early, because if you look down the side of the slide, I've got a CSA logo there, building regs logos, lead logo, and an ASHRAE logo. That means all these documents require this job done, right? So if you're involved late, you need to be doing a retrospective review of this. If you're involved early, you can advise them on what to include. And a design brief includes things like service life, facade. A building is a system of systems, and the facade is probably the most important system. So what should the facade life be? What should the performance be? How does it interact with the systems? But specifying the scope of work as well. If you want building envelope commission, you should be asking for it. It needs to be costed and accounted for all the way through. So getting that scope of work early is really important. A budget. So what's a budget for commissioning? It can be a time budget. It doesn't have to be a hard budget, but it needs to be accounted for. So this is my favorite one. Because I've worked in 21 countries, there's no common agreement on what commission is and isn't, right? The UK is quite a unique market in that test and balancing here is called commissioning, and commissioning management is what really other people call commissioning. But that said, it's really important to have a kickoff meeting, right? So do you know who that guy is? Unbox Therapy, YouTube? Anyone? No? So am I a 58-year-old YouTube dude? Must be. Anyway, so this person has one of the biggest YouTube channels in the world, and he unboxes electronics and stuff and gives reviews, right? For me, the commissioning kickoff meeting is like a project unboxing meeting. You get everyone in a room, because no one wants to be there, no one knows what commissioning is, and you just go through the project, you unbox that project, you go through the commissioning plan, you explain who's responsible for what, you go through the program, you go through who's got to deliver what at what stage, and then you have a Q&A. So it's part kickoff meeting, it's part educational, and the idea is when everyone leaves that meeting, there is a common understanding and agreement on what is in front of you. So you're not getting big fights halfway through the job about who's doing what when. This is probably one of the most, this takes half a day or a day and adds a great lot of value to the job, right? For not a lot of cost. Commissioning specification workshop, right? So if you are involved in the design phase, you have the ability to review the specs and make sure everything's in there or not. So probably 50, 60% of the specs I see are horrific copy and paste jobs going back to the 70s and 80s. They don't cover water treatment properly, they don't cover mission critical systems, they don't cover factory acceptance testing, so all that needs to go in. This is not a big job, this is one day's work, just to review the specs and make sure everything's in there, or not, consistent with the design brief and the type of building and how mission critical it is, right? O&M manuals, how you want them delivered, how you want them presented, who's doing that. That all has to be handed out, and there's a reason for this as well. So I do a lot of work in the Middle East. The way it works there, you have British culture, American culture, European culture, local culture, Australian culture, and when you're designing a building there, you're never sure what sort of international mix you're getting on the design team. So they specify every code and standard known to mankind. And the problem with that, even in the UK, there are different tolerances for systems, right? So this is just an example on balancing water systems. So all these standards have different tolerances. So again, it is on us as commission managers to guide the client on what to include and what not to include. If you have a tolerance that's too much, you waste time. If you have a tolerance that's not good enough, then you don't get the performance out of the system. It all matters, right? My phone, an iPhone, right? That is a million little things done really, really well that add up to a great experience. A building is also the same as a phone, right? It's a million little things done well that add up to a great experience. Now, the commissionability review, we're going to spend a few slides on this. Why are we doing this? If you can intervene during design and manage quality into that job, you can do that for no money, right? So what I mean by that, if you do a drawing review and you see a problem and you can fix it on a CAD drawing, that takes no money, right? If you find a problem, the later you find that problem in construction, the more it costs. If you are on a job site and you see someone ripping something out, because there's a problem, that's a double economic loss. One, you've got the cost of fixing it, and two, while people are fixing it, they're not progressing the job. Who pays for that? Normally the client out of the contingency budget. So this is, I love this, Tony Science, Anthony Fauci, flatten the curve, right? If you have a certain amount of issues you're going to have on every job. You have a choice. You either deal with them early and cheaply, or you deal with them late. If you deal with them early, you flatten that curve and you flatten the risk profile for that job. And that's what that image is all about. So the other thing to say is, again, this is where there's a disconnect between design and delivery. During design, there's lots of energy models, there's CFDs. All these energy models and CFD simulations, they assume that every system is set to perfection. Every set point has been empirically done and set, and is absolutely optimal. That is the basic assumption of every energy model that is submitted for LEED or BREEAM or even to the client, right? In reality, that doesn't happen very often. A chilled water system, a heating system, a VAV system, there is an optimal set point, normally at one device. I call it the single point of effectiveness. That has to be derived from empirical testing on site and then given to the BMS person, then coded in that system before the FM people change it, right? But this is where this disconnect between design and delivery, I think, is going to change as more evidence-based performance, real-time performance comes in, because you're not going to be able to do an energy model and wing it and then not have it calibrated in the future. We're moving into that space. But as commissioning people, one of our jobs is to find these single points of effectiveness and make sure they are set optimally to get that system to perform. We have commissioning firms here. How many people here with a commissioning firm are insured for design, PI for design work? 2 hands up. Okay, congrats. Most people who do design commissionability reviews are not insured for design work. And this is not a first principles design review. This is a commissionability review, right? So the basic fundamental question is, does this system and all its components and all the things it interacts with, are they commissionable? Is everything there we need to test it and verify it? Will it operate properly? Is it consistent with the owner's project requirements and design brief, right? So that is the 80% of that review. If you can find a problem and fix it, it's no cost. You will also see errors and omissions that people have missed. There's nothing wrong with that. You bring that to the attention of the designer. And you also can find and have opinions on good practice. I mean, there's no building code in the world that says you can't have 30-foot of flexible ductwork, but you shouldn't have 30-foot flexible ductwork, right? But that's a good practice opinion. That's a design engineer's choice. Most design engineers are not happy when you tell them you're going to do a commissionability design review. I've had the Braveheart situation a couple of times. Because it's a level of, it's a level of scrutiny that they're not used to, right? But as a commissioning provider, be clear, you're not doing a first principles design review, and you cannot write that report where you take on design liability, unless you're insured for it, right? So just on that, when you're doing a design review, right, there are things in life that are prescribed, like building regulations, life safety codes. Then there are things that are mission critical, down to the type of building you're doing. Then there are things that are specified, and then these are all the things you've got to look at, right? There's almost a checklist. This is like a checklist I use when I go through a set of drawings and I look for design commissionability issues. So just to give you an example of the power of a commissionability review, I did a job in Canada and opened all the drawings, and every VAV box had a multi-leaf VCD damper shown on the drawing, on the inlet to the box. So if you know about VAVs, you do not need that. And it was just a silly copy and paste error. So it literally took 20 minutes for the designer to open it all, get rid of them, right? That saves $50,000 on that job. When you do a commissionability review, I've seen good ones, I've seen bad ones. You can only review that as well with reference to the specification and the owner's requirements, right? You can't say, oh, on my last job I did this, therefore this is what should happen here. Or I'm awesome because I've got 30 years experience and I think it should be this. You can't do that. This is professional level stuff, right? You've got to do it by reference to something, and you need to justify your opinion. So if you have an opinion that, I don't know, the static pressure sensor should be 2/3 of the way down the duct on a VAV system, then you need to be able to justify that if challenged. Why that's a good idea by design, for operation, for maintenance, right? So these are some of the things we include in ours. Why an evaporator should have a certain amount of measuring devices on it, for example. So, next one. Sorry, just to close out design review. When you have a commissioning management fee, probably 80-75% of that fee is towards the construction end of the project, and only 20-25% would be to the design phase of the project. But I would argue that you get 80% of the value on the design phase, because in design, you can manage quality and you can pick things up. In construction, it's a quality control game. You can only enforce the specification, right? So let's talk about enforcement. One of the problems with commissioning is, and this might change now with the golden thread and the new building regs, but you can specify what you like, but if you don't enforce it or have consequences for not doing it, it doesn't matter, right? And that's the sort of zone we're in today, I believe. There's still there's a lack of enforcement, there's a lack of consequences. I think that will change. So enforcement really matters. Now, if you're a development manager or a developer, you need expertise on hand to let you know what you don't know, right? To enable that enforcement to happen. Okay, that's all I've got to say on design phase commissioning review. So let's talk about the design phase commissionability plan. Show of hands, who here normally provides a design phase commissioning plan pre-tender? No hands. Okay. So this might or might not make it into the new CODEM. I hope it does. This is really powerful because when you go out to tender and then you go into contract with someone, the only thing you can ask those people to do is what's in them documents. If you put out a design phase commissioning plan as part of the tender package, then the contractor can't say, I didn't know I had to attend, I didn't know I had to do this, I didn't know I had to be there for this, right? That's what this is about. This is about protecting your client and signaling forward what is required, that it is an iterative process, that it is a multi-discipline process, right? Now, the design phase commissionability plan is really not actually a big document. It doesn't include all the functional performance test sheets because they have to be based on authorized sequences of operation, for example, right, which happens in the submittal process. But you can still map out the commissioning process. You can map out the scope of work. You can map out, is the CCTV included in this? Is building envelope included in this, right? So I think this is another high-value, low-cost item that if you put it in and then get it out in the tender documents, then there's no excuse for the contractor not to do it. Program, outline program. Now, programs get people emotional, right? Because they involve manpower, which is money, time, which is money, contractual deadlines, which is money, right? So this is a commissioning network. What you see here is a one-page representation of the whole lead commissioning process, from pre-design to occupancy. So all that information is, and all the deliverables included, so all that information is on one page here. So this is what I call a commissioning network. Andrew Reed and Partners, shout out to Andrew Reed and Partners, taught me how to do this 22 years ago, and I've been using it ever since. Right? A design phase program can just be something as simple as a network, an overall network. We do this then, this is the milestones, this has to happen before that, because you can get people to agree to that, because it's what I call a dimensionless program. It doesn't have dates, it doesn't have time, it doesn't have money, it has process. This happens here, this happens here, this happens here. And again, it's a signal to the bidding teams of what has to happen, and sometimes it helps communicate the complexity of what has to happen. And you get a lot of information on one page if you do it right. So, final slide, and I'm good on time. Ooh. This is sort of, I'm crossing into someone else's territory a little bit here. Factory acceptance testing, right? So you don't have this on every job, to be fair. This is really for mission critical jobs like data centers, banking floors, hospitals, biolabs, things like that, right? I'm so tired of seeing specs that say, oh, we want factory acceptance testing, and they do not schedule out what systems, are required, or who's doing what, when. So as a plea to any designers who've come across this presentation or who are here, please specify it if it's necessary and detail out exactly what equipment is included. If you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it, right? You can't be angry later on in the job. Oh, they didn't do this for me. Well, you didn't ask for it, so I want money, right? So anyway, those are the 7 things I think add real value to a job for not a lot of money. If you get that in, you go to tender, then you're enforcing the documents. If the documents are inclusive and detailed, you have a much better outcome, a lower defect outcome, a higher performance outcome. That's all I got. Thank you very much.